All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Shad Murib. I'm the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party. I'm thrilled to welcome you to the first in a series of great forums that we'll be having with our statewide and congressional candidates over the course of the primary season. I want to wish everyone a happy St. Patrick's Day. Normally, I don't dress up for something like this, but I figured this required my only green tie I have. And so I hope all of you are having a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. The purpose of these forums is simple. We have one of the best fields of candidates in this primary season that I've ever seen. And it makes me proud to not just be a Democrat, but proud to be a Coloradan with the high caliber of candidates we have running for office across the state. And so this is an opportunity for you to not just hear what each of these folks wants to do if they're elected and chosen to be our nominee heading into the fall, but also hopefully get to know them a little bit more as people. Because at the end of the day, this system is not something that is a Capitol building. It's not something that's the departments in downtown Denver. It is made up of all of us who have a fierce dedication to making our state the best place to live, work, and play. And so I'm thrilled to introduce our first candidate in this series this evening. You're going to be hearing from a lot of folks tonight. And so I want to get right into it and welcome our friend, Attorney General Phil Weiser, who's running for governor. And Attorney General, the first question I have for you is why do you want to be governor and what kind of Colorado do you hope to help us build?
Thank you, Shad, for your leadership. Really appreciate you serving the way you are for all of Colorado. I have experienced the highlight of my life as the elected Attorney General for the people of Colorado. I've been about public service my whole life. That's been my commitment as a first-generation American. I believe in the values of this country, freedom and opportunity for all deeply. I hadn't served before an elected office. 2016, like for many of us, was an earthquake in my life. I had been planning on more appointed federal public service. Instead, I'm now doing elected state public service, working on a range of challenges, how to help Coloradans be able to afford to live here, the housing challenges, healthcare challenges, childcare. I know they're top of people's minds. Also, I'm concerned about young people growing up facing a youth mental health crisis, not feeling a sense of belonging, not feeling a sense of hope and opportunity. We've got a lot of work to do. On all that, please check out our Colorado Blueprint, over 100 pages at philforcolorado.com. And of course, we're living at a surreal, challenging moment for this democratic republic. We need leadership that is able to lead with moral clarity, conviction to fight for what is right. I've now sued this administration 60 times and counting. I won't give in. I won't accommodate. I will stand strong for our values, protecting all communities, our immigrant neighbors, the LGBTQ community, making sure that we keep progress on climate and more. We need leadership that's strong, that's courageous, that's hopeful, and that is deep in experience in our state. I've been doing this work. There's much more to do. It'd be an honor to serve you as your next governor.
Thank you, Attorney General. And I should note, all the candidates are going to be getting asked the same questions this evening, but if I hear something particularly interesting, I reserve the right to jump in on it. And that's one of those things that you just said. As a first generation American myself, I'd love if you wouldn't mind just sharing your experience and how that shaped your dedication to service.
The story that I have, like every first generation American story, is a both unique story, but it's also somewhat of a classic story. My grandparents survived the Holocaust. They were remarkably resilient. And I am a first generation American who grew up with my mom, with my grandparents, not taking this country's values for granted. One of the terrible things about the demonization of immigrants right now, immigrants are the most patriotic people I know. Shad, you're another great example.
Yes.
We don't take our country for granted. We praise, we celebrate our values. America depends on immigrants. And in my family, the difference between my mom being born in a concentration camp and liberated by U.S. Army soldiers and me going to law school, getting to clerk for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, work in the White House for President Barack Obama as your attorney general, and now your next governor. It's one generation. That's the American promise for everyone. That's what I want for everyone. That's what I'll fight for as our next governor.
Thank you. What was that moment that made you first want to run for public office?
Well, I gave you a pretty strong hint. Election night 2016. There's a great expression, which is man plans, God laughs. So I had a plan. to be a part of the Hillary Clinton administration. Shad, you and others may have had the same plan. And I can say we are in the wrong timeline. For those who don't get the reference, I'll recommend some sci-fi books for you. In this timeline, the Hillary Clinton administration was not an option, which meant I had to answer a question that I had theoretically thought about, which is you can't just wait to be appointed to serve. It's important that you be willing to run for office. Anyone on this Zoom thinking about running for office, please contact me. It's important that good people run for office. And I decided to make that journey basically knowing our republic was on the line. That was the decision I made in early 2017. And it's the one that launched me now as an elected official. That was not my original plan. My plan's always been public service, but elected office happened after Trump was elected, and I had to answer the question, what could I do? And my answer was to run for Attorney General. It's been an honor to serve.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned your blueprint for Colorado, and I know there's a lot to dig in there. What we're interested in talking about today, though, is a policy priority that you would focus on as governor that might surprise people and might not be as well known in the grander conversation we're having in this country around affordability and the cost of living and taking on the Trump administration. What's something that you think might be surprising for people to hear that you're passionate about?
We in Colorado need to do much better enabling people to re-enter after they're incarcerated.
Hmm.
The national rate at which people leave prison and come back to prison within 3 years is 37%. Colorado's rate is 45%. Think about that. If we were only average, more people would have opportunity to build a better life for themselves. Communities would be safer. We'd be spending less money on prisons. There'd be fewer victims. There are few public policy opportunities that are more important than improving our reentry system. As Attorney General, I have had a very close view on this. We've worked on some pilot projects. I've been an advocate, but as governor, I will have the responsibility to oversee the Department of Corrections and to make sure that we are delivering on what I believe is a economic, moral, and public safety imperative. We can, we must, and we will do better in this area because I've got plans on how to do this. I've been working on this issue. I'm ready to take it on day one.
Well, and as you know, I mean, you've been in public life now for many years. It comes with tough moments and lots of sacrifice. Fill these folks in. What has been one of the most difficult experiences in your political career, and what did you learn from it?
One of the challenges that I have faced was when I was appointed the special prosecutor involving the death of Elijah McClain. Anytime you're investigating law enforcement officers, firefighters, there is high risk, there's political risk, there's a lot of attention. And I am always committed to doing the right thing, whatever the political consequences might be. And we did that. We put together a great team. We worked hard to get the evidence to a grand jury who issued indictments. We brought the evidence to 3 different juries, and there were 3 convictions to bring justice for Elijah McClain. I knew there would be negative consequences, but I live with the knowledge that as long as I am true to my moral compass, acting based on principle, I'm going to be comfortable sleeping at night. I'm going to know that I am standing for what is right, and the political consequences will be what they'll be. That was my commitment before being tested in this way, but obviously it's different when you face the test. Do you pass a test of principle? Are you willing to stand up against haters, against death threats, against political threats? And I'm always going to be willing to stand and fight for what's right. I've done that. That's one powerful example of it. There are others.
Well, and tell us in that case a little bit about the blueprint that you have for Colorado.
I am a big believer in grassroots democracy. When I announced my campaign January of last year, a lot of people said, Phil, why did you announce so early? And my answer was because we have a lot of work to do. First, I had a day job that was very demanding that I'm committed to doing fully. I also wanted to make sure I fully heard from the people of Colorado what is on your mind. To everyone on this Zoom, please take a look at this Colorado Blueprint and share your feedback with us so we can improve it. I am a big believer in what was a principle that was famously coined in the open source world. With enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. You all have the ability to read the blueprint, and many others have, and make a point like, Phil, you could improve your reentry plans by doing this, or you could have more effective climate action by doing that, or you can make sure to make housing cheaper and get it built quicker by doing this. Please take a look. It's at philforcolorado.com, and there's no area that we didn't work to hear from people and cover. And you can note whether it's water or public safety or education, we're putting out our ideas and we're going to continue to elicit your feedback so that when I'm elected, it's not like Robert Redford, the candidate, where he says, what do we do now? It's we've got a lot of work to do.
Well, and we have about 5 minutes left with your time, and so I want to use every minute of it so people can get to know you. So I'll ask our last question and maybe a follow-up if we have some more time. But if Colorado voters remember just one thing about your candidacy tonight as they walk away from this event, what do you hope that is?
My commitment is to show up everywhere to make sure that people are heard. When I heard from individuals in southeast Colorado, the San Luis Valley, about this fence that was in Castilla County that was harming a community's access to hunting, access to religiously significant sites in violation of a longstanding easement, I went to Castilla County, one of the poor counties in our state, to hear with my own ears what people had to say. I am going to be committed to showing up all across Colorado, making sure people know I am fighting for you. I take this job as the people's lawyer very seriously, to listen to people, to really hear what they've got to say, and then fight for them. I will similarly be the people's governor. My agenda is to fight for the people of Colorado, knowing that I am listening to you, I am working with you, and I believe in you. And together we can build a great future for Colorado.
Thank you, Attorney General. We have some time. I want to make sure that you have anything else that you want folks to know about or anything that you want to say about your campaign here.
We have an important question in Colorado about what type of leader that we need. And what I want you to know about my leadership, not only am I committed to fighting against this Trump administration, not making excuses or trying to accommodate. There's been a lot of debate about how accommodating to be. And there are people who will say, if I try to make nice, I will build better relationships. My view is when you're up against a bully, you need to stand for what you believe in and fight for it. And I will keep doing that. When you're up against irresponsible companies who are taking advantage of people, ripping people off, corporate landlords, social media giants, and more, I'm always fighting for the people. I am powered by you, powered by your stories. I believe in this project of democracy. I know I'm not going to have out-of-state billionaires putting money in a PAC to run attack ads. I'm going to have the people of Colorado spreading the word person to person. That's the type of politics I stand for, I believe in. That's what this campaign looks like. Please join us however you can. Learn more at philforcolorado.com.
Well, Attorney General, I think I speak on behalf of everyone that we're grateful for your service as AG, and I'm also grateful for your friendship, the support you've been giving the Colorado Democratic Party, both in terms of boosts of energy and helping us build great programs is something that a lot of folks won't forget and are entirely grateful for. So thank you for your friendship, thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your desire to continue serving the state of Colorado.
Thank you, Shad. And Shad, I just want to say in that partnership, 2024, we're working together on the Horizon Project, focusing on CD8, doing the type of people-to-people politics I talked about. We'll be at it again this summer, and we'll flip CD8.
That's right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, sir. All right, folks, thank you so much, Attorney General Weiser. Again, like I said, we have an unbelievable slate of candidates for you to be choosing from this primary season. And I believe our next guest is with us. Hopefully, I'm not moving too fast, but I believe that Senator Bennet has now joined us, who is also running for governor. I'm looking at my screen to make sure that is true. And I see him here. Senator, it is great to see you. How are you?
It's great to see you too.
Well,
Thanks for having me and thanks for having everybody. Appreciate it.
No, we're so glad for this opportunity to highlight, like I said, what an incredible field we have of candidates that are selflessly throwing their hat into the ring. And so, our first question is really basic. Why do you want to be governor, and what kind of Colorado do you hope to help to build?
I think I want to be governor because I think the real battle in this country right now is in at the states and at the municipalities, just like it was 100 years ago in the last Gilded Age when we had to fight back against the barons of that age. And the ideas didn't come from DC. The ideas came, they bubbled up from the people, and that's what's going to happen again. I think we're at a moment that we were in 100 years ago when people were inventing the ACLU. They were inventing the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They were inventing the modern labor movement that Roosevelt was able to inherit to drive progressive change through the New Deal that lasted for generations. And I think we're at that moment again. And you asked me about Colorado. I think two things. One, Colorado, I think, can lead all 50 states in this battle, not just the fight against Trump, and we do have to fight against Trump, but in a fight for the American dream. There is not a county in Colorado where anybody feels like their kids are going to afford to live in that county, and our kids are devastated by the fact that they don't think we have room for them in Colorado. It's not just housing, it's healthcare, it's childcare, it's the economy that's not driving wages up. All of it together are creating a situation where there's real question about whether our kids are going to live a better life than we've lived. And I think that question has elected Donald Trump twice as president of the United States. I think Colorado and Colorado Democrats can lead the nation in showing what the path forward is. And the path forward is a rising economy that works for everybody, especially working people. And a rising economy is one where we know emphatically 10 years from now that our kids are going to be able to live in Colorado. And today they have absolutely no faith that they will be able to live in our state, which is tragic in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And your term as Senate began in an interesting way, in an unusual way, of course. And so you didn't necessarily get to make that choice, I guess, of what made you want to run for public office before you served as senator. But what was that moment while you were serving your first term that made you realize you wanted to be running for office and be in that public sphere?
Well, what I have always believed is that the fundamental responsibility of one American to the next generation of Americans is to create more opportunity, not less, for the people coming after us. That's why I left the private sector to go be the superintendent of schools in Denver, a job where, I had a fairly ritualistic beating almost every single day that I got up. We were fighting for the kids of Denver, kids living in poverty mostly, and kids of color in a really successful effort to try to make things better for them. And that's what's gotten me out of bed every single time I've been in one of these jobs, whether Barack Obama is the president or Donald Trump is the president. Actually, Shad, honestly, when Trump got elected the second time, after I had said very clearly over and over again where I thought the Democratic Party was losing that national election, I felt that the moral obligation that I have to my own children and the moral obligation that I have to the kids that I used to work for in the Denver public schools and the kids who live all over rural Colorado whose families want exactly the same thing as the parents in Denver want for their kids, that we have to live up to that responsibility. And I think that's on all of us. That's just not on somebody running for office. It's on every single one of us, I think, at
No.
this moment for sure.
I agree. And like I was telling Attorney General Weiser, where everybody's getting the same questions, but if I hear something interesting, I've wisely reserved the right to be able to dig in on it a little bit more. And for him, he mentioned his being a first generation American. And for you, you just mentioned something that I think is important for folks to know, which is Colorado's bigger than just the Front Range. And you have worked consistently on public lands in your time in the U.S. Senate. I'm curious if you don't mind telling us your views on rural Colorado and how Democrats can win
Sure.
rural Colorado back.
As I come to that, I think that a lot of people don't know my family's story. Phil tells his a lot. I don't, but my mom was born in Warsaw in 1938, a Polish Jew, the year before Hitler invaded Warsaw. And She and her parents were the only, and an aunt were the only ones that survived. And she was separated. My mom was separated from her parents for 3 years during the war. And I can tell you that that does cause intense generational trauma. And we've seen it in my family over all these years. And my mom's still alive, and she was alive to see Donald Trump separating children from their parents at the border. And she doesn't call me much, Shad. She does not call me much, but to, uh, she called me to say, I see myself in those kids. And that's why I've been so devoted to trying to bring back those families together that Trump has separated. You're right on public lands as well. We've worked together to protect 700,000 of acres of public lands from Hermosa Creek to Browns Canyon to Chimney Rock to Camp Hale to one of the most important pieces for me, Camp Amachi. You know, we love to tell the story of Camp Hale. We love to tell the story of the fight that we took to Hitler in the Second World War. We forget about Camp Amachi, a camp built at the same time as Camp Hale. Same fight against tyranny, same fight against dictatorship, same fight for our values, except in one place we were training people to fight on skis. In the other place, we were incarcerating 12,000 Japanese Americans out of race hatred, as Ralph Carr said. It's a perfect example, I think, of the stakes that are in front of us right now and why this is not a moment for small ideas or coloring inside the lines or failing to live up to the expectations that our kids have for them, which are justifiably very, very high, I think.
I think it's absolutely right. And whether you're looking online, whether you're traveling around the state, you're 100% right that people are ready for big and bold ideas. And I think this is an interesting opportunity. I know you're talking about this quite a bit on the campaign trail, but I'm curious if there's one policy priority that you would focus on as governor that might surprise people or might not be the most bombastic or loudest message about how you're going to fight for affordability or the cost of
Yeah.
living, pushing back on Trump. But what's something that might surprise people to hear that you want to be focused on?
I'd say two. One is that I've said that Colorado, no working person in Colorado should have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. I'm meeting people every single day that are spending 40, 50, 60% on housing. I don't believe that you can live a middle class life in America or in Colorado if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing. I do not think there is another candidate in America who is running on that platform. And I think it's an incredibly progressive platform, especially given how horrible the current situation is when we're living in a place where we have the second most expensive housing in America. And the other thing I think surprises people sometimes is when I tell them that I really am for a true public option in Colorado. I believe in universal health care. I believe that health care is a right. I think it is shameful, especially that young, and by the way, I was the 60th vote for health care. I was the 60th vote for Obamacare, and the Republicans said I was going to lose after that vote, and I took that vote anyway. And because Colorado Democrats did what Colorado Democrats do best, we saved health care for 30 million Americans. But I am sick and tired of the private health insurance system that's not delivering for our families, not delivering for the next generation. We should have a true public option in Colorado. And by the way, as we get to that, we should allow all the county employees, all the municipal employees, all the people that are working so hard in childcare centers all over Colorado, they ought to be able to buy into the state healthcare system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget that headline. I think can't remember if it was the Rocky or the Denver Post, but red wave crashes at Colorado's borders, which is great.
That's exactly right. And by the way, you may remember, not remember, Shad, I was for this public option back during Obamacare, and Joe Lieberman killed it on a Sunday morning on a talk show because he represented the insurance companies in Connecticut. If we had included it then, I wouldn't now be meeting people and graduating from Gunnison who are saying, Michael, I'm coming off my parents' insurance next year. What am I supposed to do? Take two or three jobs to pay for my health insurance. They're right. That's ridiculous. In the richest country in the world, that's insane, but that's the world we're living in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're talking a lot about people's sacrifices, and public life itself comes with tough moments and a lot of sacrifice. And so I'm curious, What has been one of the most difficult experiences in your political career, whether it was private or professional, and what did you learn from it?
I would say, frankly, the Democratic Party sleepwalking into a second election, second loss to Donald Trump. I blame Trump for many things, Shad, and you know I do. Many things. The list is long, but getting elected is not one of those things. We should never have lost the first election to Donald Trump, and it is pathetic that we lost the second election to Donald Trump, and we handed it to him. And I think we have the chance now in Colorado to correct that mistake. We have the chance to be able to show what it looks like to build a governing coalition that can deliver affordable housing for working class people as well as for the poorest people that we have, that can deliver a public option and health care for people in a country where it should be universal, that can deal with the expense and cut the expense of childcare while at the same time we're paying childcare workers a living wage and can make sure that our kids are graduating with the skills to earn a living wage, not just a minimum wage. We are doing none of what I just described. That's not the Republicans' fault. We haven't delivered. And I think Colorado can deliver. And if we can transform the lives of people living in Colorado, if we can give people a sense that when they work hard, when their kids work hard, that their kids are going to live a better life than they lived, and they're going to be able to live that life in Colorado. That will be a national model that's as important as anything that we're doing in Washington, D.C. right now. And Chad, that's the reason why. And it's really true. And it's the reason why, I'll just finish here. It was the reason why I was the first national politician and the first person in the Democratic caucus in the Senate to say we were going to lose in a landslide if we kept Biden at the top of the ticket because of the obligation I feel is so intense to our kids and to our grandkids. That's why I'm willing to, say when we're headed in the wrong direction, not just everything that's wrong with Trump, which is basically everything about Trump.
Yep. If we want to build a better Democratic Party, we have to be honest with ourselves about.
We have to. And
Yep.
there's such amazing leadership, Shad. You've done an incredible job. There's unbelievable leadership all across the state, people that are precinct captains and they're working so hard. I mean, we've got the talent in Colorado to be able to build the kind of political coalition that I'm talking about. We need a governor who can do it and who can do it by pulling together rural Colorado and urban Colorado.
Well, and our final question for you is if Colorado voters remember just one thing about your candidacy tonight, what do you hope that is?
What I hope it is that that we are committed to the idea that over the next 10 years we're going to be able to turn around and say our kids can call Colorado home. The American dream is alive again in Colorado. Working people can afford housing and health care and child care in our state, and the rest of the country is looking at Colorado and saying that is a place where a Democratic governor has delivered for working people and built a coalition that the rest of the country can look to for an example at a moment when we desperately need it. Shad, I know you know this. No one is coming to our rescue. There is no Chuck and those, they are not doing it. We are the ones that have to write the next chapter in American history. And I think we can write that chapter together in Colorado.
Well, you have a couple minutes left with us here too, and so that was a good closing. But like I offered Attorney General Weiser, is there anything else you want people to know about your campaign?
I would say please join the campaign. You know, I spent the weekend in Grand Junction actually you mentioned it, meeting with young people. So let me do that for the last 2 minutes. Our My kids are now, it's shocking. When I started this job, they were 9, 7, and 4. Now the girls are 26, 25, and 21 years old, and they are raging just like the rest of the young people in Colorado. And I'm doing these meetings with kids that are between 35 and 25 because they won't come to my town halls. They won't come to my fundraisers, obviously. They're working 2 and 3 jobs often. They hate politics. They hate politicians. They hate the political parties. They even hate the Democratic Party sometimes. But they are the most fascinating meetings I am doing, and I'm doing them all over the state. And what they are saying is, we want a chance to live in Colorado. We want you to recognize, boomers, that you have been on the right side of an inflation of assets and inflation of houses, all including Shad, where you live and where I live. We want you to know, we want to understand that you acknowledge that you've been on the right side of that, and the rest of us can't buy into the state because you have been unwilling to make it possible for us to do it. I think their voices can define the agenda for the next governor of Colorado. That's why I'm having all of these meetings with them, and I'm not waiting for them to come to my meetings. I understand what it takes to build a real coalition, and that is finding people that disagree with you as much as people that agree with you. We agree on a set of principles about civil rights, about economic mobility, about the role that Colorado can play. How we get there in the end, we're going to have a lot of debates about that. But we need somebody in charge who's not scared of disagreement, who's not scared to go where it's hard, who's not scared to engage even the Republican Party in rural Colorado in these debates and discussions as well, like Tabor as an example. And I think given the experience that I have dealing with really tough fiscal problems in our state, I'm prepared to do it. And I would ask you to join my campaign. Even if you think I got in here because you thought I was quitting the Senate because I hated working, I was tired or upset or hated working with Ted Cruz. The only one of those that's true is that I hated working with Ted Cruz. I still hate working with Ted Cruz, but I am not tired. I am not aggravated. I just believe the fight's going to be in Colorado, and I want to help you lead that fight. I want to help you lead that fight, Colorado Democrats. And we could use your help in this campaign.
Well, Senator, like I told Attorney General Weiser, I'm a lucky chair. I think I have one of the best delegations, both federal and statewide, to be able to work with. Appreciate your friendship. Appreciate everything you've done for the state
Thank you.
in the
Thanks
U.S.
for
Senate.
all you've done. It's
No,
not an easy time. So thank you for everything that you've done.
it's not. Well, thank you for your
All right.
candidacy. We'll
Good
see you
night,
soon.
everybody. See you soon.
Good night, Senator.
Bye.
All right, so those were the first two candidates for governor you're going to hear from tonight. Like I said, we're incredibly fortunate to have Attorney General Weiser and Senator Michael Bennet running for this really coveted and important position that's going to make a huge difference in our lives, regardless of who wins. And we're actually going to transition now. We'll return to the governor's race at the end of the evening, but we're actually going to move over to the U.S. Senate contest. And I believe our first guest is Senator John Hickenlooper, if he's available, and we can put him up on the screen. There he is. Hey, Senator, how are you? He's unmuting.
This thing up.
There we go. No, we can hear you loud and clear.
So can you hear me?
Perfect. It's great to see you.
Good. Great to see you. Thank you, Shad. Great to be on.
Well, welcome. We're so excited to hear from you. I was just telling everyone about the incredible candidates we have for governor, and that's true for Senate as well. We have a remarkable field. And so I just want to jump right into it. Senator, what motivated you to run for the U.S. Senate, and what do you believe Colorado needs the most from Congress?
Well, the tricky thing is here, we're being destroyed by the Trump administration, and fighting for people that have been so disenfranchised by Trump and had look at all the hundreds of thousands of people in Colorado that have lost their access to health care, or it's doubled in price. We've got friends like people like Carolina, who's a dreamer and a college student, detained by ICE, who were tipped off by local police, and they held her for 15 days before she was released. The police broke the law. These are people's constituent lives. And I feel, the reason I'm in this fight is because I've seen firsthand what this lawless administration is trying to do, right? Their budget took away $4 trillion of working people's money and basically gave it to the Epstein class. His war has driven the cost of gasoline up 50 cents. People are going to pay over $1,000 a year, the average driver or American citizen, Coloradan. They've illegally um, forced people and small businesses to pay all these tariffs. That's basically $175 billion to the whole country. Um, and they're not going to pay it back even after the courts have told them it's illegal. So I'm in this to fight and protect the people of Colorado, who really have just gotten the short end of the stick, just like as America has. All the promises that this president has made have turned into lies. There's an ongoing joke evidently in the White House is that a promise is just a lie waiting to happen. And that's sad to say, but we're going to force Trump to refund every one of those tariff taxes. We're going to force him to lower the cost of healthcare. We're not going to give ICE another penny. And we're going to, well, we've defeated his efforts to sell public lands. Go down the list. We're going to fight and fight and fight. And we're winning this fight. Doesn't feel like it every day, but we're winning the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you've had the honor of being our senator, our governor, mayor of Denver, and curious going back to when you first decided to enter public life, what was the moment in your life or your career that shaped your decision to pursue public service?
Well, and a lot of people know my origin story. My mother was widowed twice before she turned 20. She raised four of us by herself. She grew up in the Depression, and I was the the youngest kid, and I was skinny, and I had thick, like Coke bottle glasses. Um, and people made fun of my name. I was always bullied all through elementary school, and I developed a feeling for the marginalized kids, the underdogs. I was an underdog. And so I grew up, in high school, I would always stick up for the kid that was being pushed around. I tried to be the person who would, uh, you know, uh, I was the outsider and the underdog. And the same was true when I started. I got laid off as a geologist. I got laid off in 1988. I was out of work for a couple of years, and I wanted to open this. The only thing I could think, I didn't want to have a boss, and I wanted to open a brew pub in lower downtown. People said it was impossible. It was abandoned. The rent was $1 a square foot per year. And I just felt like that same underdog that the people there, they were fighting for their neighborhood. They wanted to rebuild lower downtown. So uh, I did that, and I did it by getting restaurants to work together, and collaborate. And when I ran for mayor, nobody thought I had a snowball's chance in hell of being mayor. And yet I ran on that same issue of like, we've got to bring everybody together. And I may be the underdog, but there are a lot of underdogs out there. And if we all band together, there's a lot we can do. We were the first city in America to have high quality early childhood education for every 4-year-old. I ran for governor, and we'd gotten all the suburban mayors in the metro area to work together so well that I became the first. I mean, talk about underdogs. That's the first Denver mayor in 120 years to get elected governor. And we went after the same things of bringing people together and finding a way to fight back for better jobs and better healthcare. We expanded healthcare to over 500,000 people when I was governor. And I see this battle right now with Trump. He's trying to cut healthcare. He's trying to take away people's opportunities. When you do $4 trillion of tax cuts and you give it to the super wealthy, you give it to the Epstein class. Well, someone's got to pay that, and they're expecting the working people of Colorado and America to pay that. And I think we're going to win that fight, and it's going to be brutal, but we're going to win that fight because we can't afford to lose it.
That's absolutely right. And you're talking about these big issues, healthcare, housing, cost of living, fighting Trump. I think a lot of folks are always so interested in what the day-to-day of these offices look like. And so one of the questions we're asking everyone tonight is, what is a policy priority that you are pursuing or would pursue in the Senate that might surprise people and might not be as well known as some of these big issues?
Was I too close? I can't tell.
Huh? That looks great.
I can't see what I look like, which is a good thing. I grew up without using mirrors as much as possible with the Coke bottle glasses. Um, I think people would be surprised. I mean, everybody knows that we fought for healthcare. When I was governor, we added 500,000 people to get coverage, as I've said. when I was mayor, part of that process of getting early childhood education for kids was we knew that was part of their healthcare system was getting them into a doctor's office when they're as they part of that preschool program is to make sure they had a medical home. Um, I think what I think people don't realize is how much time we're spending right now, um, and how long I've been doing it around healthcare. So when I was in college, I helped a guy start a community health center in Middletown, Connecticut, where I put up sheetrock, helped put up sheetrock in the partitions. I took the photographs for the early newsletters. They're now 52 years old, and he even my friend had me writing letters to the newspaper, where at the end I'd say why the city funds shouldn't be redirected to some transportation infrastructure or some intersection. And I say at the end of these letters, I put in, after all, shouldn't healthcare be a right and not a privilege? And so now Bernie and I tease each other. Bernie Sanders, also, who said healthcare should be a right and not a privilege first. I look at what Trump's done to the Affordable Care Act and just kind of ripped apart all the improvements we've made. And you know, I see a lot of work and a real fight, but we've got a bill, and I think I'm going to get this through, but with total transparency, and we're gonna force the system to adapt, and with transparency, I think we're gonna actually not only lower costs, but be able to dramatically, once and for all, get to universal coverage. And in that process, I guarantee you, Trump is going to be coming at us day in and day out, and we're not going to back off. I think the goal is, flat out to make sure um, that we win this battle, that healthcare is a right and not a privilege, and that the year of fighting, the years and years of fighting, are going to build us something that, not only are we going to get to universal coverage, but we're going to have a system that really works for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking a lot about the sacrifices people are having to make for these policy choices that the Trump administration is pursuing that are forcing us to pay for billionaire handouts or for corporate handouts. And, public service itself also often comes with difficult moments and sacrifice. And so I'm curious if you wouldn't mind sharing with us a difficult moment you faced in your political career or your life, and what you took from that experience and how it guides you.
Well, let me think on that. The hardest struggles are always the most personal struggles, and when you deal with people who are going through the worst hard time, uh, go back a little bit. Uh, when I was mayor, uh, literally 7 days after I got elected, a month before I got inaugurated, sworn in, a 15-year-old black kid named Paul Childs got gunned down by an inexperienced Denver police officer in his front hall. And we spent the next 2 years trying to figure out how to make sure we had Office of the Independent Monitor with subpoena powers, how we had a civilian oversight commission. Um, all this working with the family of Paul Childs and the Black Ministerial Alliance. Um, when I became governor, and sometimes you can't handle, you learn things no matter what life throws at you. Uh, the shooting in the Aurora movie theater. I was one of the first people on the scene there. Uh, I will never forget those images that are burned into my mind. But we put it into action, and with all the battles and the pickup trucks circling the state capitol, honking their horns all day. But in the end, we were the first purple state to pass universal background checks. And then later, when we had that flood in 2013, I mean, I've never seen such devastation. I remember flying the helicopter over, you know, canyon after canyon. And not only is the road washed away, the subbed of the road is washed away. Also, some places you can't even see the foundations where the house was. You see people sitting on their roofs waiting to be saved. We actually, in one helicopter, helped take someone off their roof. And you realize how much of what we have can be taken away. And you can't help thinking about our democracy that same way. Right now, we're facing the worst disaster ever with Trump, right? When I was fighting for universal background checks or to make sure we had a police force that was properly regulated, uh, when we were, dealing with the incredible devastation of that flood, nothing prepares you for, I think, what we're seeing right now. Those are emotional tolls that they take on you, but you try to learn from them. And I think right now we're fighting for our democracy. Donald Trump wants nothing more than power. And he's realized that if he helps raise up and find, sources of money for these corrupt, let's call them the Epstein class, that's what I've been calling them, the that is something he believes that's going to give him power. We cannot allow that to happen. And we've got to push back. This will be the fight of our lives, right? My mother would tell us when I was a kid that when in 1943, when she was a young woman, they took German classes because they thought Germany might win the war. That's how fearful they were. I think we can be no less fearful right now in terms of how we fight back against Trump. And we have to mobilize for these midterm elections. We've got to not just sweep the House, we've got to win the Senate and build the foundation to win the White House in 2028 as well. So, and I know, Shad, that's what you guys have been working towards, and that all across the country that's going on. But we've got to do it, right? And we're going to have to work harder and organize longer and really do whatever it takes to win. Take all those experiences we've all had and turn them into action.
That's absolutely right. Well, we have 2 minutes with you, Senator, and I want to make sure we use every minute that we have with you. And so, what would you want Colorado voters to remember most about your candidacy as they walk away from the event tonight?
Well, as the underdog and the outsider, I was always, people would always write me off. The thing I wanted people to remember was that I worked as hard as anybody could, and I committed myself and everybody I worked with that we would do everything in our human capacity to deliver what was needed. And whether it's a better healthcare system, an expanded healthcare system, or school system that's moving in the right direction, or getting universal background checks, all of these demanded huge amounts of time and effort and a team of people working together. I want people to remember that, I gave it 110%, my whole heart, my whole time, and I'm not going to quit. It's going to take all of us to give it that 110% and take it right over the finish line in November, and recognize that that's not the end. That's setting the stage to really reclaim our country in 2028 and beyond. It's not going to stop in 2028. So I'm in it. I appreciate all the help everyone's given me along the line, and you, Shad, and the party. I will do everything I can to make you as successful as possible, and I will do everything in my power to make the state as successful as possible.
Well, Senator, we're so appreciative you joined us here tonight. Like I was telling Senator Bennet and Attorney General Weiser, I think I'm the luckiest chair in the country. I have the best federal and state delegation of any of them. I can guarantee it. And I just appreciate everything you do for the Colorado Democratic Party and for the state, for the country. So thank you for joining us here tonight.
Well, vice versa. Thank you, Shad. Keep up the good work. To all of you, thank everybody who's on this call. Thank you in advance for all the work you're going to do.
Oh, thank you, Senator.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. All right, we have an unbelievable slate of candidates for U.S. Senate, and I'm delighted to introduce our next guest this evening, Karen Breslin, who is also running for Senate in this primary. Karen, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can I be heard?
Of course. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks
Good.
so much for this opportunity.
No, we're so
Appreciate
grateful you're joining us here tonight. I know we only have limited time, so I'm just going to jump right into it. What motivated you to run for the United States Senate, and what do you believe Colorado needs the most from Congress?
Well, I'm a political science professor. I've been teaching politics for about 30 years, American government in particular. And when Trump emerged on the scene, and takes office in 2016, it was really obvious to me that our system was broken. And that had been clear to me for decades, but it became very manifest with the election of Trump. You don't get a Donald Trump as a viable presidential candidate if your political system is working properly. And so when he is reelected, it's just horrifying. pardon me. But what really got me, off the dime, as it were, was I think it was February 7th when I filed my FEC paperwork was his actions in creating Doge, his attacks on federal employees, his attacks on due process and immigrants, the trans community, DEI, all of that in just the first couple of weeks of his administration, and really even in the first week. And I was fearful that people would not understand the severity of those actions, and the danger that we were facing. Because the problem is, if people don't catch the abuses as they happen and really stand firm against them in the moment, then they can escalate. And that's exactly what did happen. And so just yesterday, the young woman from Colombia who was illegally taken off the street and put somewhere just was released after 1 year with no due process. That should not happen in the United States of America. And so I decided early on to use my platform as a candidate for the U.S. Senate to try to fight to save our democracy, because I was afraid the political class would just think of Donald Trump as a policy problem rather than as a democracy problem. And I think that that's been largely the case, starting to shift after Minneapolis. But for many, many months, the Democratic Party, leadership has treated Donald Trump as a policy problem rather than a threat to the very existence of our government. And for me, as a lawyer who's litigated some constitutional cases, watching Donald Trump, thumb his nose at the restrictions on his power, taking funds that Congress allocated and appropriated to the state of Colorado, destroying government agencies at will as if he had that authority, the actions against immigrant communities, creating this paramilitary force that is ICE. All of this was just shocking to me. And everything that I understand about democratic systems of government is that, again, you have to be immediately responsive to those kinds of risks, or you run the possibility of losing your system entirely. And so that democratic erosion is incremental, it seems, because we're living our lives. But we are not in the same country today as we were a year ago. And, Donald Trump takes no shortage of liberties with his power, and the courts come in and try to stop him, but he just ignores the court orders. And so if we want to restore our system of government, we are absolutely going to have to find our voice in Congress, in the U.S. Senate, in the House, as well as all of us on the street. And that's begun to happen, but we're behind the curve now. Right? And we really need to get on top of this. And that's what keeps me up nights, because all of the policy conversations we can have are important, of course. But if we set the precedent that the president is beyond the control of Congress and beyond the control of our Constitution, we have fundamentally altered the system of government. And that's really what has happened under Donald Trump.
It's an excellent point. And, taking a step back from the current moment, kind of going back to the moment that you decided to run for office, was there a moment in your life or career that shaped your decision to pursue public life?
Well, I was a federal employee. I worked for the National Park Service for 25 years. And before that, I was a reporter covering Congress and the executive branch in some fairly minute and probably pretty tedious detail to most people. But all of that was driven by a belief early in my life. I think I was 10 or 11 when I really started to think about politics and the way that some people's lives are shaped by oppression and shaped by want and lack and the unnecessary human suffering that all of that created. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, and in the aftermath of the civil rights movement, racism is still obviously a thing. But I had great teachers who taught me about the civil rights movement, and I think that was a huge inspiration for me as I decided what I was going to do with my career. So I become a journalist, I study political science, I cover Congress, and I end up in the executive branch in the National Park Service. And the through line through all of this, I go to law school, do public interest law work. The through line through all of this is a desire to leave the world better than I found it, which I know motivates so many Democrats and so many people of conscience. And really realizing after I'd left federal service that things are not better than I found it as a young person when I first became a Democrat. I was a precinct captain at, I think, 19 or 20. And not only are things not better, they're substantially worse. And that was a shocking and disturbing realization to me. And I realized at that point that everything that I had fought for with my law career and everything I tried to do in the National Park Service and everything that I tried to teach my students about our system of government, that all of it was meaningless if we did not really step up to this moment. And so that's what propelled me into electoral politics.
Well, and everybody's getting the same questions here tonight, but I've told some of the other candidates I've reserved the right to dig into something if I hear an interesting reply. Tell us a little bit about growing up in the South, if you don't mind digging in a little deeper and what that did to shape your worldview on politics.
Well, school desegregation was ordered in 1974. So we lived in kind of a quasi-rural area in Louisville metro area. And the inequality between the inner city schools and the suburban schools was substantial and driven by racism. And federal courts ordered desegregation and they ordered busing. And the first day of school, the KKK burned crosses in 3 parts of town. And that stuck with me. I was shocked. I was horrified. I couldn't imagine what the young people who were coming from the inner city and out to the suburbs, what they must have felt, the fear that they must have felt. I'm kind of feeling a little teary thinking about it right now. And I realized in that moment that racial injustice was a struggle for me as well, that I might not be on the receiving end of that, but it was up to me to try to do what I could to address it. And I've tried to make that a centerpiece of my campaign work. It's something that I focus on in my teaching career. And so that's been very formative because the truth is the racial wealth gap persists. This many decades after enactment of the Civil Rights Act and so many other measures designed to sort of try to deal with it. And it can only be attributable, when you look at the numbers, it can only be attributable to systemic racism. And so what are we going to do about that? And that's an issue that's very important to me and something that I've thought about quite deeply and am prepared to act on legislatively if I get the opportunity. Because you cannot have a stable society when you have these kinds of embedded inequalities. You can't have a politically stable society. You cannot have a healthy society or well-functioning society when some people are systematically kept out of the mix in big and small ways.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. You're rightfully talking about these big issues that are facing us, democracy, the cost of living, the threat to our environment. I'm curious, if you were elected, what's something that might not be one of the top of mind issues that people would find surprising that you'd want to be digging in on and working on?
Well, environment is one you mentioned, and we are not paying attention to that. We think about climate, but we don't think about the biodiversity loss. We don't think about air pollution as we should, air toxins, all of those sorts of things. So we need a comprehensive strategy around environmental protection, and we need to connect that to climate because protecting the environment also helps us protect the climate because natural places that are left alone will absorb carbon out of the atmosphere. But the thing that, that I'm also motivated by that people might not be paying attention to is protection of the rights of Native peoples, along the same lines of my feeling around racial inequality, that this country has abdicated its responsibility to Native peoples for literal generations and literal centuries. And the United States is a signatory to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And that means that the United States should in fact be trying to uphold those norms, and we don't. And I don't know that there are hardly any members of Congress that even knows it or notices it. And I would be trying to pay close attention to that.
That's great. Thank you for that. And, we're talking about so many of the sacrifices that people are making, especially in Donald Trump's America, where these sacrifices come at the cost of corporate handouts, billionaire or handouts, or threats to our democracy. And so people are struggling with a lot. I'm curious if there was, a difficult moment in your life, whether it was your career or personally or professionally, that you feel comfortable sharing, and what you took away from that experience.
Uh, can you elaborate just a little bit on what you mean by difficult?
Yeah, just, a challenging moment in your life or career that kind of you learned a lot from in terms of how you'd approach this job.
Uh, well, you gave me that question in advance, and you'd think that I would. And I did think about it, but somehow you phrased it a little differently. So now I'm hearing it something slightly different in the question. I, I mean, I've had multiple experiences of that sort, like almost anybody who's, of a certain age who's lived it and had multiple careers. But I think the thing that has been true about me across all of my endeavors, including this campaign, is that I try to tell the truth as I see it. And I try to do so in a way that is not strident, although sometimes I know I can sound pretty firm about things, but but I won't read the room, and I will say what I think needs to be said based on my hopefully thoughtful approach to things. At least that's what I aim for. I won't couch what I'm saying because I think that it's going to be unpleasant for someone to hear. And that has created problems in my career. It's also helped me advance professionally. But, people often want you to just kind of go along, and I'm just not wired like that. I'm just not capable of doing that. And that showed up in my professional life in the National Park Service, and it showed up in other parts of my career, and it even shows up on the campaign trail. An issue like the filibuster, and I'm going to give you an example. It's been a bit of a Democratic Party talking point for a while now that the filibuster is the reason that bad things, happen and why we can't get good things to happen. But as we speak, the SAVE Act is hung up in the Senate because of the filibuster. And so when I'm asked, will I support ending the filibuster, my answer has to be no. Because as a reporter covering Congress, I saw really bad legislation get stopped, often by Democrats using the filibuster. And so the federal government was designed to be, the founders intended it to be a check on abuse of majority power. That's why we have 2 senators per state. It's not proportional in terms of population. It's why the House is structured differently. It's why there's 6-year terms instead of 2. And, and the filibuster is consistent with that idea that you kind of need a backstop to some crazy ideas. And the whole, MAGA kind of movement illustrates the dangers of having too much political change too quick, and the need for some level of, consensus building around key things. That's not to say that there are times when the filibuster is misused and when it doesn't stand in the way of things that I personally want to see happen. But to ditch that tool as a way of kind of stopping the bad stuff I don't want to see happen, I cannot get behind that. And I have to say that to people. And, I was in kind of a raucous meeting up in Larkspur. I don't know, it was probably 50, 60 people there. And they were very much not happy with what I had to say. But I had to say what I had to say. I can't change my position on that. Now, that said, I have had people make arguments to me that have prompted me to rethink and at times modify my position. And so I'm not closed-minded, but it takes, I need to be persuaded. I won't just do it because it's unpopular. And that's resulted in me saying things on the campaign trail where I'm bringing substantive policy points to the mix. And that can get you in trouble too. This is why many politicians don't do that. Because somebody's going to hear something they don't want to hear.
Sometimes you just
And you
gotta
might
say it
suffer
how it
from that
is.
as a candidate.
I
Right.
get it. I think we've all been there. Well, Karen, we have just under 2 minutes left with you, and I'd love to just get this last question in here if I can. What do you want Colorado voters to remember about your candidacy when they walk away from this event tonight?
That we need to keep the process open to people who have appropriate background and training to bring something to the conversation without just sort of looking for whether somebody's a career politician. As a 25-year federal employee, you're not allowed to pursue partisan elections. You're not allowed to do that. So it was never possible for me to have a political career in a traditional sense. And one of the things that I've learned over the course of being in this race is that there are a lot of really talented people out there who are not conventional politicians. So I think that precedent is one that would be worth, allowing more freely in our process. The second thing is what I said earlier, that reward people who are willing to be honest about what they understand about the situation. Ask political figures to really tell you what they think. Don't settle for good sounding words and nice ideas. Make them really explain how they're going to get from point A to point B, because I've really tried to do that. And I think just, this was a long struggle for me and my team, and we're still here and we're still fighting. And I think that says something about, the importance of fortitude in this moment, because I know so many people in this party are doing the same. Like, I'm so touched by how hard people fight. People spending 10 and 11 hours on Zoom. And then for the people who are responsible for making it all work, had to spend even more hours than that, right? And so I'm honored to be a part of this process because so many people are working so hard. And I've tried to match my energy to that, and I hope that people think that I did.
Well, I agree. And like I was telling, I think Attorney General Weiser, this party isn't the Capitol. It's not any sort of department building. It's the people who show up. And you have shown up. And so to close us out, I just want to thank you. It's been a joy getting to know you over the past few years and exciting to watch your candidacy. And like I've been telling everyone, I'm the luckiest chair because I know I'm going to have one of the best, if not the best, federal and state delegations now, but also after this election. So thank you for your candidacy, Karen. And thanks for joining us here tonight. We really, really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you for your time and your support and putting all of this together today, Shad, and everyone else.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night, Karen.
You too.
All right, we are going to continue right into our next candidate for Senate, and then we'll return to the race for governor. I'm so excited to welcome Senadora Julie Gonzalez, who is here with us tonight. We have such limited time that I've just been jumping into it. But first, how are you?
It has been a beautiful day, and I'm so glad to be able to join you here this afternoon. And thank you all to the Colorado Democrats who are listening in. Just shout out to y'all as well for taking time out of your lives to engage in this process, to get to know your candidates, and to listen. And as you're making your decisions about who you'll be supporting in this upcoming primary.
Here, here. Well, let's get right into it. What motivated you to run for the United States Senate, and what do you believe Colorado needs most from Congress?
Thanks for the question. I'll just say that it is hard for me to talk about who I am without first telling you about my people. My family goes back generations down in southern Colorado in Huerfano County. So shout out to the folks in Gardner. And I have to say that when my mom was pregnant with me, my dad got a job managing 5 different ranches on the San Carlos Apache Reservation down in Arizona. So the family joke was that, made in Colorado, but born in Arizona. I lived on the res until I was 10 years old, and then my dad got a different job managing a different ranch, this time on the border of deep South Texas. And so both the res and the border are incredibly political spaces. But, 5-year-old Julie and 5th grade Julie didn't have the vocabulary to understand power. I had to go to college and learn a bunch of fancy words to actually understand that one, if you don't have institutional power, or two, if you don't have institutional wealth, then you got to organize people in order to make concrete change. And so, look, I decided to jump into this U.S. Senate race because I witnessed what took place in Aurora, what took place in Centennial, what took place in Pueblo and in school board races across the state, where even though community-centered candidates were outspent by their opponents, by their MAGA extremist opponents, we outworked those extremists, and folks won, right? Aurora flipped their entire city council, and y'all, that is what inspired me. That this is the moment that we can stand up, fight for working people, and actually lead with our values.
Over 70 seats across the state in places you wouldn't expect, Democrats won. It was an amazing election night. So thanks for shouting that out.
Absolutely. You'll love to see it. And that is the demonstration to me. I believe that in this moment, y'all, we need courage, not caution. And this is absolutely a moment for Colorado to decide, right? Do you want 6 more years of go along to get along politics? Or do you want a senadora who's been battle tested, who's done the work, both organizing out in community on issues of affordable housing, immigrant rights, and educational justice, and also leading the fight inside the halls of power in order to advance reproductive freedom, in voting rights, and upholding our Constitution, right? That to me is the question that you all as primary voters get to make decisions about this June.
Well, and you touched upon this on your first answer, so maybe just digging in a little deeper on some of those experiences you shared with us. But was there a moment in your life or your career that motivated you to pursue running for public office?
It's if when I was a kid, I was a nerd, and I used to go to these events that were called University Interscholastic League tournaments. And we would do things like dictionary skills and maps, graphs, and charts, and how many numbers, how many math problems you could do in your own head. Anyway, so it's a Saturday. My dad, who's a rancher, was taking me and my kid brother to one of these meets. And like I mentioned, I grew up on the border in South Texas. And so we got pulled over by the Border Patrol. And in that moment, it did not matter that my family had been here in the United States since before it was the United States. It didn't matter that my dad had served in the Air Force and served in Vietnam. That Border Patrol agent was like, "Where are you going?" And my dad says, "I'm taking my kids to school." And the Border Patrol agent says, "You're lying. It's Saturday." And you know that moment when you just can feel the sense of frustration and the bitterness in the back of your tongue when you want to say something? Little kid Julie wanted to say something, and I didn't. But my dad knew just how to navigate that situation in real time. And at the end of the day, he got us to that UIL meet. But I hated the way that it felt to bite my tongue and not say what was on my mind. And I decided right then and there that I would always speak truth to power, even when my voice shook, even when it was hard.
No, thanks for sharing that. That's a powerful story. And I mean, you're talking about these big issues and also these cultural issues, informative issues. Uh, the life of a U.S. senator and as a state senator, as you know, is full of tiny fights all the time. And so I'm curious if there's a policy that you'd be pursuing as a United States senator that people might find surprising or that maybe isn't the most top of mind issue, but is important to you.
Absolutely. Well, I graduated high school way back in 2001, and in that summer, the DREAM Act was introduced. And the DREAM Act is a policy that would allow undocumented high school graduates who either enlist in the armed forces or go to college to access a path to citizenship. Y'all, the DREAM Act is now old enough to get a beer, and it hasn't yet been enacted. The poster that you have behind you, right? Where the system isn't broken, it was built this way, Shad. Like when it comes to ICE, that is fundamentally cruelty and treating people without basic due process. That is ICE in a nutshell. And so when I talk about this work, I believe that we ought to abolish ICE and replace it instead with a system that actually includes a path to citizenship, that treats people with dignity and respect at every single step of the immigration process, that doesn't force babies to represent themselves in immigration court without access to legal counsel, and that strips away the profit motive at every single step of the process. I'm talking the surveillance that we have witnessed from corporations like Flock and Palantir. I'm talking for-profit immigration detention, which was pioneered right here in Aurora back in 1987. And the corporations that are getting rich off of the buses and the detention flights, right? We ought to instead replace ICE with a system that treats everyone with the dignity and values that all human beings deserve.
Absolutely. Well, and you're talking about the sacrifices that people are having to make for these systems that are broken and mistreating them.
Mhm.
And, public service also often comes with difficult moments and sacrifice. And so I'd love to hear from you on a difficult challenge, whether it was personal or professional, that you faced in your political career and what you've learned from it.
I think the most difficult moment that I have had to navigate in this journey of public service was right after, in the midst of the COVID pandemic. My uncle's mom, I'm sorry, I said that incorrectly because it's hard to think about and talk about. But during the COVID pandemic, my husband's mother, uncle, and grandfather all passed away. And we held a triple funeral. And then days later, we started back at the state capitol. And one of the things that I really wanted to make sure of was that elders in our community had access to the COVID vaccines. And so, even in the midst of a lot of grief, a lot of turmoil in the state legislature, myself and other elected officials uh, in Northwest Denver, we called ourselves the Jefas, and we were partnering alongside community-led organizations in order to ensure that elders had access to the COVID vaccine. And so it was about, in that moment, being able to translate pain into purpose and make sure that people had access to those life-saving vaccines. And it has been a joy to be able to see the results and the fruit of that work now that we're on this side of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I remember that. That was
Yeah.
unbelievably hard and I think clarifying for a lot of us on what exactly was happening out there in a moment where we were very unsure. So, uh,
Yeah.
well, we have a few minutes left here. Yeah, I hear that. What do you want Colorado voters to remember most about your candidacy when they walk away from this event here?
Look, y'all, I want folks to know that the fact that you are making the affirmative decision to listen in to this conversation right now, when there are so many other things that are vying for your attention and your time, when we are working harder than ever to just get by and make ends meet, that y'all, ain't nobody coming to save us but us. We're the ones that we have been waiting for. And so you all have such a beautiful and unique opportunity to really make this decision quite clear. This is an opportunity for Coloradans to decide whether or not we want 6 more years of poll-tested politics, or whether we want a senadora who's willing to do the work, even when it's hard, right? And to do the work, to stand up to the corporate lobby, to actually advance Medicare for all, universal child and elder care, and to unrig the economy so that it works for folks like us, not for the billionaires and the corporate lobbyists that they control. And so I'll just say that doing the work has often meant standing up even when it's hard. And what a joy to be able to do that alongside so many Coloradans across this state. What a joy to be endorsed by Indivisible Colorado, by the Working Families Party, by SEIU, by the Sunrise Movement, and by so many others. That's what I hope that you all recognize. And the last thing I'll say is this. Colorado has never elected a woman to serve as either governor or to serve in the U.S. Senate. There are only 3 other states that have that same dubious distinction. That's Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Idaho. Y'all, we can make history. We can have nice things if we're willing to fight for them.
Well, we have just under 3 minutes left, and I want to make sure these folks get every minute of your time that we're grateful to
Absolutely.
have. Is there anything else you think that we need to know about your candidacy?
I will just say this, that um, we have incredible momentum, and I do just want to demonstrate my appreciation to all of the volunteers who make this party run. Your resilience is what pulled us all through. And I just want to say thank you. And I also just want to say that imagine what having a senadora at the top of the ticket for folks who either have felt like they have been taken for granted or folks who feel like their voices have never been taken into consideration. Just think about what having a senadora at the top of the ticket could mean for races like CD8, like in CD5 and also in CD3 across the Western Slope and in Pueblo as well. I know this because I've been organizing both outside in community and in the halls of power, y'all, for the last 20 years. And it's just a joy to spend time with you all and to say that we can have nice things if we are, again, willing to fight for them.
Well, Senadora, I've been saying this to everybody, and I'm sure our visitors are tired of hearing me say it, but I am incredibly grateful to be chair of this party, but also knowing that not only do we have such a great field of candidates, I'm privileged to have the best federal and state delegation now. I know that's going to remain true in the future, especially after this election. That's because of your candidacy, and appreciate you running, throwing your hat into the ring, and also just appreciate your friendship and on behalf of both me and Carrie, who I know values your friendship and wisdom.
Say hi to baby Yuli.
I will. Thank you, Senator, for joining us tonight. Have a great evening.
Take care, y'all. Good night.
Folks, that concludes our candidates for U.S. Senate. I think you'll all agree we are lucky as a state. We have an incredible field of people who care a whole lot, who have the chops to get it done and change Washington for the better. And so we're lucky here in Colorado for those candidates. And we're grateful to be able to also return to the governor's race, where we were able to welcome Eric Underwood, who's also a candidate for governor here as our final candidate. And I see he's just joined here. Eric, how the heck are you?
I'm great. Shad, how you doing?
Doing well. It's really nice to see you. Like I've been telling the other candidates, we have such limited time that I just want to jump right into it. And
Sure.
so I'll start with this. What motivated you to run for the United States, or I'm sorry, for Colorado governor? And what do you believe that we need from our next governor of Colorado?
Sure. No, thank you for the question. I want to be governor because I've lived a life that most politicians only talk about. I grew up the oldest of 6 children, 2 sets of twins, raised by a single mother who worked every day to keep us together. I know what it means when a family can't afford childcare, can't afford a doctor, can't even afford to stay in the neighborhood that they grew up in. I've been that kid. And I've spent my career, or some of it anyway, in the United States Senate. And I built a career in technology and also in the courtroom, learning how that system actually works. The Colorado I want to build is one where your zip code doesn't determine your destiny, where a single mother in Pueblo has the same opportunity as someone in Boulder, where we actually can keep the promises we make to people on housing, healthcare, on education, and justice, which is very important to me. And I'm not just running to manage Colorado, I'm running to transform it.
Well, a little bit more about that. What was the moment that made you decide that you wanted to run for public office?
You mean in terms of way back when, or just in this current cycle?
Anytime, maybe that formative experience that people might
Yeah.
not know or have learned about you would be great for people to hear from.
I think this would be timely. I have thought about this in the last few weeks since Jesse Jackson passed away. I have to take you way back to '88. A lot of people don't think I'm old enough, but was born in '79. So, but when I was 8 years old, I loved riding my bike everywhere. And one afternoon, I rode my bike a half mile down this street in Princess Street. And at the time, I lived in Pennsylvania, in York, Pennsylvania, to be exact. And I noticed something. There was this house that was converted into an office, and there was adults going in and out, and you can feel the energy. And as I got closer, I saw a Jesse 88 banner in the window. And I didn't really fully understand the significance at 8 years old, but one of the adults invited me inside, and I went in, and there was like this food buffet, there was fried chicken, there was cake, and one of the adults gave me a Jesse 88 button, like one of those pin buttons. And I just remember the energy and excitement in the room, seeing people on the phone. And when I got home and told my mother, she smiled, and she had this smile where she was moved because I was telling her and how excited I was about this. And she told me she was hoping that Jesse Jackson would be the first Black president of the United States. And as we know, he didn't get there, but that moment never left me. And now 38 years later, I have a chance to make history of my own to become the first Black governor of Colorado and join only a handful of Black Americans to have ever done so in the history of this country. And my mother's smile from 1988 is a part of why I'm standing here today.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Uh, there's, I think, these big issues that you're referencing and talking about, whether it's policy or political or cultural. And, I think that the job of a governor is sometimes so hands-on and you're dealing with so much. And I'd be curious if there's any sort of policy position or priority that you'd focus on that might surprise people.
I think what would surprise people is my idea about state-run grocery stores, especially in this economy and grocery prices. That would definitely surprise people, and I've gotten a great response on a campaign trail. But the truth is, Colorado families are being crushed at the checkout line, and corporate grocery chains are posting record profits while families around Colorado are choosing between groceries and rent. And my plan would create state operated grocery stores offering 40 to 60% savings over major chains, particularly in rural communities and food deserts where families have no real option at all. In fact, some families have to drive an hour just to get to a Walmart, if any. And in St. Paul, Kansas, this is actually a real thing. And they actually have a municipal grocery store for some of their residents.
Huh.
And it really directly fundamentally attacks the affordability crisis. And no other candidate is really talking about this, of how we can bring down those grocery prices. And eventually I would like to bring that to the front range as well. And, if I can slide in another one.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
I would say my child care plan surprises people too. It's a voluntary 25-cent donation at the retail checkout lines that would generate over $81 million annually, and will provide up to $2,500 a month to about 200,000 Colorado families. It's not a tax. It's not a mandate. I view it as neighbors helping neighbors. Solutions really, in my opinion, don't have to be complicated. They just have to be real and tangible.
Yeah, some creativity goes a long way. Well, there's I think a lot of sacrifices people are facing, and you're talking about that here with grocery prices, with rent prices, housing prices, just more generally. And to dig in on your experience, and you shared a little bit about this, but public life comes with its own tough moments and a lot of sacrifice if you're elected. And I'm curious if there's just a difficult or challenging moment in your personal or professional life that shaped your worldview and, what it taught you and how you managed to, learn anything from it.
This is actually a more recent one. I'll go. I ran, for those that don't know, I ran for governor along with Jared and Kerry Kennedy in 2018. And watching what happened at county assemblies, including this cycle, I was mistakenly left off. I'll give you an example in Colorado Springs. Shout out to Colorado Springs; they're great. And El Paso County acknowledged it directly, and they was like, hey, we're just not going to do one since you're left off. And I thought that was extremely fair, because being erased from a process when you have worked hard to be in it, especially when you're a candidate of color, you just want to make sure that not only you're being represented, but you're inspiring other people, and you're also having a sense of hope of that, mistakes happen, but you get on that horse and you move on. And the system, sometimes doesn't make room for any of us. Really, it doesn't care what background you come from, what color you are. And the people of Colorado, they want to really hear your vision. And when you look them in the eye, and delegates or voters alike, they respond. And the experience is, you have to have that determination more so than anything, and just keep on going.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. Well, and if Colorado voters remember just one thing about your candidacy after this evening, and they're walking away, assessing the candidates and taking stock of everything they learned about you as a both somebody who's pursuing policy, but also just about you as a person. What do you hope it is?
Sure. I hope that they will remember that I told them the truth. Not what's convenient, not what's poll tested, the truth about what's happening to Colorado families. The truth about what it means to be governor who actually lived the life of the people that, I intend to serve. The truth is what the moment in history that we're in right now, especially with Trump and him reaching way over the line that he should. And, I want them to understand that they also can be a part of history. And also, I want them to remember that there was a candidate that was on that stage who had real plans, who had real courage, and who looked everyone in the eye and said, "Hey, I am here to serve." And not the donors, not the party insiders, not APAC, not any PAC. I'm here to serve the people and do what's right. And I want them to remember that we all had a chance to celebrate history together as one Colorado.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate that. We have just around 4 minutes left with you, and so I want to ask you the same question I've asked everyone else who left us with a little bit of time. What do we need to know about your candidacy, and is there anything else you'd like to be sharing with us here?
What I want people to know is when I ran 8 years ago, we had different challenges, and I was the only candidate at the time, and looks like it's true this time around, the only one that wants to repeal Tabor. We have to repeal Tabor to pay for our schools, roads, and bridges. I want to get that back on the ballot, and I will campaign like if I'm running for governor all over again and educate all of Coloradans of what this policy and amendment is doing to our state. And I also want to do something about special interest money. I want to do something about APAC. There's two things I want to do on day one. One, sign an executive order abolishing private prisons. And what I like to do in my second executive order on day one is order my attorney general to file a federal lawsuit against APAC to have them registered under FARA, because APAC money has disadvantaged a lot of our congressional candidates, our state candidates, and they're a foreign agent as far as I'm concerned, and everyone knows it. And I'm going to lead the nation on making sure that they register through a federal lawsuit. And it's about time, because a lot of people say, Eric, it's great that you're not taking any APAC money and PAC money, but what can we do about it? And I thought this through, and we can file a federal lawsuit on APAC. We have legal standing to do so. And that's going to be on day one. We're going to take them on, and we're going to see what happens.
Well, Eric, thank you so much. Like I've been telling everyone, we're lucky as a state to have you as a candidate, to have such an impressive field of folks who want to throw their hat into the ring and serve the state. And so I just want to say thank you for joining us here tonight. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit, and good luck with the rest of the campaign. Thanks again.
Thank you, Shad. I appreciate it.
Of course. Well, folks, that concludes our evening's program. Like I've been saying this whole night, we are incredibly lucky. Colorado is leading the way, both in terms of how to tackle the incredible challenges that we're facing here, whether it's kids being torn apart from their families, people being tossed into secret prisons across the state managed by ICE, forever wars in the Middle East that Donald Trump has engaged us in, and the cost of living that has just gotten worse and worse as Donald Trump takes more of our money and more of our services and uses it to give his donors and his family handouts. And we have a big job on our hands here this fall. And so not only do we have to make sure that we win the Senate and that we retain the governor's office, but we have an incredible fight for other statewide offices like Attorney General, Secretary of State, and Treasurer. And that says nothing of the fact that Colorado is the spear tip of us winning the House and taking Speaker Mike Johnson's gavel away from him and giving it to a Democrat. And so our time is now. We have incredible contests across the state filled with candidates who want to serve you. You're going to hear from more of those folks over the next few months as we continue to host events just like this, both in person across the state and concluding on June 6th at DemFest, where you're going to be able to visit with candidates for all of these offices and see more forums and interactions between these candidates as you make an incredibly important choice. Who is going to lead our ticket this fall? We are committed to victory. We are committed to unifying against this incredible field, no matter who emerges, because the stakes are too high for us to not. So thank you for joining us here tonight. We look forward to seeing you again in the future, and happy St. Patrick's Day.